I was trained as an industrial designer, and that's a profession that involves making, specifically transportation designer, that involves making cars, trains, planes, and ships. And I've moved to entertainment design fairly early, using the tricks of my trade to make science fiction and cheat a little bit and make and design things that could never be built. Excuse the big titles. The editor got too happy with my name, and it's embarrassing to see your name so big, so I'm not responsible for that. Okay. So, can I start the slideshow? See, so this will be just a glimpse of what I've been doing mainly, which is telling stories and fairy tales through the medium of games and sometimes animation. And I have two projects that were specifically required by the organizers very kindly, and they were the most known projects that I've worked on. So the first one is Half-Life 2, a video game that had shipped in 2004, for which I was the art director and the concept designer. I'll go image by image. So what we're looking at here is a the Half-Life Citadel, crushing and eating an old city. So for those of you who were born and raised in Poland, you may be familiar, because this is I managed to sneak my part of my childhood experience into a video game, which was Half-Life 2. And after the multiple invasions Bulgaria has been through, where I was born, from the Ottoman Empire, the Russians and the Germans, why not the aliens? So this was the next stage, and I always start a project with pencil sketches, just to get abstraction for the media and the tools, and then move to making an illustration, which would be the more fleshed out colored version. So this was one of the first concepts that was supposed to inspire the team and talk about old Europe and the creation of a new fictional place, which was City 17. And the biggest part for me that mattered about this project, that I brought a new city, new fictional city on the map of imaginary places there with Gotham City and with Metropolis, and it's a place that I wanted people to experience. So a lot of the work done for a project starts, of course, with reference, and the easiest way is to go through Google right away. But I actually had a couple of friends and one photographer who traveled to Belgrade, to Sofia, and to Kiev to take photos and capture what's specific, but not generic, but very specific. And that's what makes a story interesting, is the specific angle. What's specific about Eastern Europe. And here was like tunnel with lights, color, temperature, which I insisted very much long time ago with sort of poor graphics of recreating the flickering neon lights in a parking lot or a tunnel in Eastern Europe. And providing a sci-fi experience on the top of this. So this was one of the most important things, again, capturing light, because the means that I use are architecture, light, and space. And this is concept art of the train station that the game starts with. And this is, somebody actually took Half-Life 2 and rebuilt it in the Unreal Engine. So this is a high definition version of it. So that's what it came down to. This was the establishing shot. And the square when you get out of the train station. What's important here is the light. Again, very specific, because I measured sort of the angle of the sun, that we have long cast shadows and capture the spirit of September in a city. And the humidity and the fog. So there's a stark contrast between the old-fashioned architecture, the soft romantic light, and the brutal architecture behind it. This is the other project, and that's a typical establishing shot illustration of a place, of a city. With Arcane Studios, I had another opportunity, which is very rare, to create a new IP, intellectual property, and create a new city, which has become, my occupation for a very long time. And this was the fictional city of Dunwall. It's an allegory of London, and actually using the infrastructure of Edinburgh, which is a medieval place. So let's just go through some shots. This was, I did this with a friend of mine because it was a huge pencil job. But these are inspirational drawings just to get to the spirit and the architectural spirit of the city. And all the pre-productions that I would do, I usually hire people that have fine art degree and are non-gamers and have never touched a computer if possible, just to get a level of detachment and work more on the infrastructure and not on the surface. Any 3D asset in animation, movies, or film are very easily confused with just textures and what you see on the surface. But what can give real depth in a video game or a place, a fictional place, is the infrastructure and the hidden spaces. So based on this, you see an example of a very rough mock-up, 3D cubes and cubes and cubes, like architects and model makers would do a long time ago, just roughing out the spaces and trying to capture the anatomy of a city. How are the streets laid out? So we don't care about color, about materials, about any small detail, but just blocks and rhythms. It sort of becomes abstract again, like music, because you just see that some cities are built in a very Baroque way. You see a central plaza with avenues coming out of it like a star, and the plaza will be the sunshine, which symbolizes power. In America, cities are done in a colonial fashion, which is with a ruler and a pencil. Everything is square, and there's no courtyards. So my concern with buildings, and you can see more of this mock-up. So in a pre-production, I would like to really go crazy and expand to the maximum of what a place would feel like. So these are just repetitive elements, like every town and every city is, of blocks and patterns. And just to mention that this is specific in the way that London and most of England didn't get the best of Renaissance, the way France and Italy had, because they were in war, and it's a very chaotic city, and it follows the contours of the river. So like a French person would say, London is un grand bordel. It's a mess in many, many ways. So I wanted to capture that spirit of the layout. And then we go to landmarks that had to be redesigned. The London Bridge, done specifically for London, for Dunwall, for the city of Dunwall, that I did as a concept, and various buildings, very similar kind of work to Half-Life 2, trying to create a place that sticks with you and captures this special moment of light, noise, shapes that you can't describe. There's no word for it, but it's the moment usually that you feel when you get off an airport into a city that you've never been before. So these illustrations that's what they're made for. Before we go into gameplay, game dynamics, and the specific is, let's make a place that feels so real that anything that happens in it is relevant. And then something more important is, very often we overlook the essence of an urban experience. The essence is just being in a place. And through TV series and movies, very often we attach ourselves to plot, which is a simple story of conflict. But if you peel off the plot, there's a bigger story, which is the place. Lighting again. I wanted to do a very radical lighting to capture in this is a screenshot from Dunwall, to capture certain seasons in England. And as you can see, if you were to take a photo in England most of the year, the sky is overexposed because it's solid, cloudy gray. So there are no clouds, no fancy skybox, just burning white light. All of these decisions are sort of radical, and this is just a quick mention on my work with light. I wanted very dramatic lighting because, like in Half-Life 2, Dunwall had an oppressive regime in the story, and I wanted spotlight, sort of German expressionism, stark contrast. So I designed actual lights that are part of the fiction and light the city, much like a theater scene, because I did not want to use classical sun and street lights, but something that was very dramatic and intentional. So I had to go and do these machines, and then a few examples of prop design. Everything with a narrative function. These are watchtowers that reinforce the fact that you're being observed and watched all the time, and they have strong silhouettes. And then a city and a place comes with an industry that defines it. Sometimes it will be the stock market, sometimes a port city will be commerce, and this in the parallel world of Dunwall, it was the whaling industry, so it was very important to design ships and devices and many things that turn specifically around how we catch whales and produce oil and energy from them. Characters. Now, characters are known to be important, but very often in trying to please everyone, characters become very generic. A mixture between an Asian, African, European face with no meaning and structure. I try to go against this, so I want to study how is an Irish face different than a Scottish face and an English face. So we did a lot of photo research on specific face features. Again, just like architecture, removing superficial detail and going just to the structure and the big brush strokes in order to give powerful sensations when you play the game and a sense of being somewhere without getting lost in pixels. And this is one of the illustrations done for the what's called the green light pitch of Dunwall, which was done by a Russian illustrator who used to be, he's called Sergei Kolesov, and he's very, very talented, and I've managed to find him somewhere in Ivanovgrad in Russia over the internet, and he was a carpet designer before he did this, as you can see by the beautiful carpet he did here. So this was my little glimpse of the pre-production of a couple of titles that I have done, and thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be in Poland.